Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. In the last 12 months, I think we've explored just about every industry and the impacts of technology on multiple workplaces and industries there. And today, I want to explore the music industry. Because the Music Licensing Collective, the MLC, was established by the historic Music Modernisation Act of 2018. And they sought to create a more efficient and effective way for digital service providers to license the music that they make available on their platforms and ensure that the proper right holders are paid the mechanical royalties that they're entitled to receive for streaming and download usage of their music on those platforms. And as a guy that often listens to my guilty pleasures on Spotify and other streaming services, I wanted to learn more about how all that works. How does an artist get paid after I listen to a few tracks on a streaming service? That's how my curious mind works. So when I have those thoughts upon listening to a playlist, I go on the internet, have a look for an expert and get them on here. So buckle up and hold on tight, because wherever you're listening in the world, it's time for me to beam your ears all the way to Nashville, Tennessee, where Kris Ahrend from the Mechanical Licensing Collective is going to talk about all this and much more. So, a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hey, Neil. My name is Kris Ahrend. I'm the CEO of the Mechanical Licensing Collective, a new music industry organization based in the States.
Fantastic. And you are in the big music city of Nashville. That's where we're talking to you today. But I've got to ask, can you share your origin story, where your passion for technology came from, how it collided with music, and ultimately what put you on this path you're on right now?
Sure. Well, the truth is there was very little technology in my origin story, or at least very little passion for technology early on. I'm a musician and a creative person first and foremost, and I'm old enough to have started out in life really at the infancy of not quite the very beginning, but early enough that I learned how to program in BASIC when I was in school. And video games for me as a 10-year-old were playing Taipan, the trading game on the TRS-80s that the elementary school had. So it was pretty early days, and technology was not nearly as impressive as it is today. I remember going to college and about junior, senior year, seeing my first Apple computer and getting to use one. And that was pretty life-changing. And then really past college, Pro Tools was the first bit of music technology that I became really aware of. And I remember buying Pro Tools for my home computer and struggling miserably to make it work. So up until really the time I got into the music business, I was a consumer of relatively unimpressive technology that, was really in the beginning stages and nothing like what we enjoy today.
Love that. And of course, it was that path that led you to the Mechanical Licensing Collective, or the MLC as it's more affectionately termed, which was established by the historic Music Modernisation Act of 2018, another acronym, MMA. And it's my belief that was sought to create a more efficient and effective way for digital providers to license their music that they make and make it available on their platforms, and ensure that the proper right holders were paid the mechanical royalties that they are entitled to receive for things like streaming and download usage of their music on those platforms. And I know it's a big hot topic at the moment, especially with artists and how much they get paid on those streaming platforms. But can you tell me a little bit more about the story behind MLC?
Sure. Well, you've done a great job of touching on some of the high points, but to maybe back it up just a couple of steps, for literally decades, the way that songs were cleared was on a song-by-song basis, share-by-share basis. Most songs were released on albums, and albums were released, in groups, 12 tracks at a time. And even at the heyday of the music business, the largest record stores may only have had 30,000 records in their inventory, 40,000 records. I think the industry was releasing 30,000 records a year. So really not that many. And that system of clearing on a song-by-song basis, share-by-share basis largely worked. But as the business shifted to digital, suddenly the amount of inventory space in a digital store became infinite. The number of recordings that were uploaded to these services grew exponentially, and everything changed to the point where today the largest digital services in the States claim to have upwards of 70 to 75 million tracks available at any given time. And under the old system, those services had to clear each song and each share of each song one by one. And the bottom line is they were not doing that effectively. They were not finding the rights holders, they were not licensing the rights, and they were not paying the rights holders properly. So it was really that failure in the market to make that connection with rights holders and some litigation that ensued that brought the digital services to the table with the rights holders. And they were able to build a consensus around the elements that ultimately were adopted in the MMA. And there are three really big innovations that came out of the MMA. The first was the creation of a blanket license. So now, rather than clear songs, song by song, share by share, rights holder by rights holder, the digital services can secure a single blanket license by providing the MLC with notice. And that blanket license gives them the right to use any song that exists in the world, provided they send the MLC the data and the royalties for all the uses of those songs. So for them, it has streamlined the process dramatically. Of course, the law created the MLC, and the MLC's job is to act as a central administrator sitting between the digital services and rights holders. So our job is to collect all the data from them, all that money, and the distributed, and that's all we do. And then the law required the MLC to establish and maintain a public database of ownership information for those songs. So if you think about the role we have and the place we sit between the services and the rights holders, the services now have to give us all of their upstream data. We have this database that we maintain that includes all of the song data or the downstream data from rights holders. And then our job is to make the connections between the sound recording usage data and the songs in order to figure out how much each rights holder gets paid. And by doing that, we were able to pay all those rights holders. So that's what the MMA really changed about the industry. It changed us from a really non-scalable work by work, share by share clearance system to a blanket clearance system with a clearinghouse organization that is responsible for making sure that all of that data and money flows through the system to the right person.
And just to bring to life everything that we're talking about here, who are the members of the MLC? And can you possibly walk me through a few use cases just to help listeners understand how you're helping them?
Sure. Well, we have lots of different kinds of members. All of them have one thing in common, and that is that they are entitled to receive mechanical royalties for songs that they have either written or that they administer on behalf of a songwriter. So the first and most obvious group of our members would be music publishers. Music publishers, of course, serve two really important functions in the life of a songwriter. They help to cultivate the creativity of those songwriters, connect them with other writers, schedule co-writes, and get their songs into the hands of artists who might record them. But music publishers also are responsible for collecting the money that those songs generate from all of the sources of revenue that exist in the world. So any music publisher who represents a song available in the US market can and should be a member of the MLC. Similarly, administrators should be members of the MLC and are. Administrators are like publishers, but they only focus on the administrative side of things and don't generally get involved in the creative aspects that the publishers do. A third category, and it's similar to administrators, are the collective management organizations that exist primarily outside the US. You've got a great one over in England. These are organizations that represent creators in the countries where they're based, and now increasingly in countries outside of the country where they're based. And their job is to collect those royalties from all the different sources around the world and then pay those songwriters. So CMOs are also members of the MLC. And then the last category, and the one that in many ways I think offers the greatest opportunity for us, are those self-administered creators who are doing it themselves. And they can be songwriters or songwriters who are also performers. But with all of the changes in the digital business now, lots and lots of people have access to the music market. And those self-administered creators who handle their own collections can become members of the MLC, and they can receive their mechanical royalties directly from us. So those are 4 different types of members that we have. And together now we've got more than 15,000 members.
Just to hammer home and put into perspective the kind of difference that you're making here, I read that MLC paid out 250 million and counting to songwriters this year alone. So can you expand on that? Because it feels like a big milestone for you, especially from the outside looking in, from my side here.
Absolutely. We started administering the blanket license this past January. So this January was the first month that services operating under the blanket had to send us their data and their royalties. 75 days after the end of January, in early April, we did our first royalty distribution right on time. And we distributed the royalties that were due for uses of those songs on those services in January. We have since done 8 distributions, 8 monthly distributions. We're about to do our 9th next week. And through those first 8, we've distributed, as you said, more than $250 million. So in a really short period of time, we've managed to stand up our organization, hire our team, build a lot of new technology, receive all that data from the digital services, and then successfully pay out those royalties to our members. And at the same time, we've doubled our membership. We now have almost 16,000 members. And we're really thrilled to be in a position where we can be serving them and paying them royalties on a monthly basis.
And I also believe that you successfully onboarded more than 40 digital service providers that sent notices of intent to operate under this new blanket license. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So go back again to fall of 2020. The law has not been signed yet 2 years. And we had only started building the company at the beginning of 2020. That's when I joined the company in January. And we had been really embroiled in the regulatory process with the Copyright Office here and trying to establish all of the rules and regulations that would govern how we do the work we do. And at the same time that we're doing that, we start doing outreach to every digital audio service we're aware of in the States, recognizing that for them, the MLC will bring certain requirements for them and certainly the benefits of operating under the blanket. So we had to make one-on-one contact with every one of those companies, get to the right people within their companies, help them understand the specifications for the delivery of data that the rules were setting out, and then get all of that set up and running in time to receive those first data files. So it was a real big effort on the part of our team. It was a great collaborative effort with the DSPs. I liken it a lot to those machines that lay train tracks, where the front of the machine is moving on tracks like a bulldozer because there are no train tracks yet, and the back of the machine is riding on the train tracks that the machine has laid down. We were kind of like that. We were building the tracks, getting the DSPs on the tracks. But as we were doing that, we were literally laying the tracks. So it all happened in a very short period of time, but was successful. And again, a real credit tone that the MMA set, wanting to make things better for everybody.
And of course, as this is a tech podcast, I've got to ask, can you tell me a little bit more about the technology that makes everything that we've talked about today possible?
Sure. Like any new tech company, we operate most, if not everything, in the cloud. We rely extensively on collaboration software like Teams for our internal meetings, for document sharing. We have a host of different apps that we use for tracking projects and workflow. And in that way, we look like a really modern company, and we are. Everything we have done, everything we have built was built in the last, less than 2 years. I think for us, though, what's interesting, and this sort of gets back to my origin story, for the first half of my life, I was not a tech person, but it was when I finally moved out of the creative side of the business and into the operations side of the business that I saw the extraordinary value of things like good process and strong data, and saw how technology can do more than just entertain us. It can enable us to be more efficient and effective. And for us, the MLC, that connection is really important because while we work with very sophisticated technology companies on the front end of our process, ultimately our mission is to serve creators and their partners by paying them. And most creators don't get into our business because they are highly technical. They get into our business because they are highly creative. So the MLC really sits between high tech and the high creative. And our role is to help build things that serve creators. So we're really trying to deliver user-friendly technology and build strong processes that make it as easy for rights holders to engage with us and do the things that they need to do to play their part in making this successful. In other words, it does not and should not feel high tech to them. It should feel high touch. And that's the balance we've tried to strike, using really current cutting edge technology to deliver a really intuitive and effective service for our members.
And I'm curious, because there's so much happening in this space right now. What are your biggest challenges? Is there anything you can share around that?
Yeah, the biggest challenge in many ways is helping all of our stakeholders understand the importance of their data. Early on in the regulatory process, we talked about creating a supply chain for data. Supply chains are things that we all hear a lot about now because they're the things that, when they don't work, prevent us from getting packages from Amazon on our doorstep or in the mail. But the supply chain for data is no different. We depend on receiving data from a number of parties upstream in the process, including the creators themselves, but also the record labels and distributors, the digital services, in order to do our job effectively, which is to send that data through to the rights holders and the payments that the data drives. So helping people understand the importance of good data, of clean and accurate data, of complete data is, I think, a huge challenge for us. It's why outreach and education are so important. We spend a lot of time talking about the fundamental data points we need to ensure that a songwriter gets paid properly. And the more we can do to demystify that, to make it seem less complicated, less techy, the better. Because ultimately, the goal of all of this data and technology is to pay people. And it needs to do that effectively. Can't overwhelm people. And often, and throughout my life, and I'm sure yours, that's been the challenge of technology. It can't be technology for technology's sake. It has to serve a purpose for people that makes their life easier or better. And for us, that means making sure people get paid.
Love that. And we are, of course, at that time of the year, that magical time of year where we're all full of hope and optimism about the year ahead and things that can improve and what we can achieve in the following year. So I've got to ask, what excites you about the industry and the road ahead for MLC? And are there any particular tech trends or anything that excite you about the road ahead?
Well, one of the things that excites me so much about the music industry at this moment is that I think we all now see the power of this new industry. When I started in the industry, and certainly when I was making music as a teenager, very few people had access to the industry. You couldn't get access to the market if you weren't affiliated with a major company. And there were only a handful of places you could buy music. And then, of course, there were, mom and pop stores around that were wonderful, but it was always a struggle, I think, for those companies. Now we have a business where music is accessible to billions of people around the world, and creators can get their music up on these services. So with this broad access to the market, there are so many opportunities, not only for new creators, but for new companies who serve those creators and companies that serve the companies who serve creators. So I think we're seeing, already that shift toward a new golden age where there is incredible opportunity. But of course, with that comes great challenges. And again, those challenges are helping all of those new participants understand how what they do fits into this large picture, and ultimately make sure that all of those people are not only focused on bringing great music to the world, but also ensuring that the creators of that music are paid. The music industry can really be boiled down to those two components. We bring amazing music, life-changing music to the world, and then we make sure that the people who create that music get paid properly for the work they've done. And if we can do both of those things in a market that is open now to every creator in every part of the world, I think that's a very exciting future for all of us to be part of.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today, learning more about the Mechanical Licensing Collective and your story. But a question I always like to ask my guests and finish the show with a bit of fun is ask them what song inspired them in the past, helped them in their career, helps them get their head in the zone before going on stage, or reminds them of their career. Now, as you are a music guy, I'm particularly looking forward to your answer here. So what would your song be and why? And we'll add it to our Spotify playlist.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, this is always one of those hard questions because once you say you're a music guy, then people are like, well, this better be really good. But the truth is, I love all kinds of music. I have never been the sort of deep dive, learn every last track of an artist person, but I really like lots of different types of music. And when I was a kid and really thinking back to those formative years, one of my favorite bands was The Police. One of my favorite artists was Sting. And one of the songs that the Police recorded that I think has a connection to tech a little bit, and certainly is a song that gets you going, is Synchronicity 1. And what I like about that song, and really the concept of synchronicity, is this idea that we all live in this connected world. What Sting focused on when he wrote that song was the idea that these connections are often not discernible and are even mystical. But I like the idea of thinking about the fact that we are all connected, that there is synchronicity, and that really fits right in line with our mission, right? We're trying to help make those connections on the data front to ensure that every song that gets sent out into this big world can have a return trip of royalties to the creator. And so that synchronicity that we need, I think, is ever present. And yeah, so that song is one that reminds me of that and has a good beat, gets me going.
You have not disappointed as a music guy with your choice there. That's a great tune. And I think a lot of people underestimate Sting. There are not many bassists that can also sing and be a frontman. It's incredibly hard to do. And a lot of people don't appreciate that, do they?
No, and talk about someone who has reinvented himself throughout his career. Even with the Police, he was never content to keep doing what they were doing. And, that's another thing that I'm always so impressed by when I look at the creators we work with. There's an expression that says, a decent songwriter can write one good song, but it's really hard to write 20. Yeah. And some of the most talented songwriters in the world have written dozens of life-changing songs. And they do that in part by throwing out everything they've ever done and constantly sitting down and thinking, how do I do something new and different and fresh? And I think Sting is a great example of someone who, through the course of his career, has done that. He's constantly reinvented himself, and I've enjoyed everything he's ever recorded and written. And great artist.
Well, I'll add that to our Spotify playlist. And for everyone listening, can you just remind the listeners of where they can find you guys online, and maybe even contact your team if they've got any questions, if we have any artists or DSPs, etc. listening? What's the best way of finding you guys online?
Absolutely. We've got a website like everyone. Ours is at www.themlc.com. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we have made support a huge priority. We have more than 20 people working on our support team full time. Their sole job is to answer the phone or to answer emails or to respond to chats in our member portal. And they do that 12 hours a day from 8 to 8 Central Time. We're right in the middle of the United States. So that means that we're up early enough to reach folks like you in Europe in the afternoon. And yet we can still speak with folks in Hawaii and in Asia at an hour that's not too ridiculously unreasonable. So 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, you can call our support team at 615-488-3653. You can find that number on our website as well if you go to the contact page. And our folks are looking forward to speaking with anybody who has questions about the MLC one-on-one. You will always get a real live human being, someone on our team who is well-trained to try to answer any questions you have. So please take us up on that and get in touch. And we look forward to serving all of you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your very personal story, not to mention MLC's mission to pretty much ensure songwriters, composers, lyricists and music publishers receive their mechanical royalties from streaming and download services. If there are any musicians listening, they will tell you how important it is and how difficult that can be at the moment. So, and of course, you also left us with a great tune as well. You didn't disappoint us as the music guy, but thank you so much for sharing all that with me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Neil. It was a real pleasure.
It's been a great year for the MLC. I think this year alone, in 2021, they've successfully onboarded more than 40 DSPs and sent notices of intent to operate under the new blanket license. And they've paid out $250 million and counting to songwriters. A year of many big milestones for the company. But if you're an artist, a musician, or you're working in the music industry, I'd love to hear your opinions and insights and experiences on anything that we've talked about today. So as always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @Neil C. Hughes. Keep those thoughts coming in, and we'll do it all again tomorrow. So thank you so much for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.